Okay.
I'll talk about sex at KSAN.
Yeah.
All right, go for it, Fred.
Yeah.
Let's hear it.
I met my wife at KSAN.
I was just going to say,
remember.
you met your wife
right.
there.
That's right.
So so I got hired 3 months after my internship. Is when Terry McGovern, who was doing the mornings at KSAN, announced that he was leaving, and they were like, okay, what are we going to do about replacing him? They had no idea what they wanted to do. And so they asked me if I would be willing to come in and produce the morning show and get paid to do it. And so they had open auditions for the morning show DJ.
Right, I remember that.
Right? And I got to work with all these great people, you know, for a day or two or more.
Mm-hmm.
Ben Fong Torres, Peter Scott did a show and then ended up in the hospital right after the show. He had, I don't know what happened to him. He ended up in the hospital and saw me months later. He went, it's you. I didn't do anything.
Harry Shearer did one of those shows.
Came up and did 2 shows. And
Really?
that to me was like one of the most important radio lessons of my life. When I got to work with Harry Shearer, because after he did 2 days, and he came with all this produced stuff, and it sounds just like his radio show that he does now out in New Orleans.
Le Show.
Le Show.
Yeah.
Le Show.
Great show.
And so Harry did 2 mornings, all this great produced stuff on reel to reel, and I was running that. And the end of the second show, about 15 minutes left in the show, General Manager Jerry Graham walks in and says, "You're hired. You got the job." And Harry's like, "That's okay, thanks." He goes, No, you don't understand. We want you to be our morning man here at KSAN." He goes, "Yeah, that's okay, thank you very much." He goes, "What's it gonna take? I mean, we've all decided, thank you." And I'm dying. I'm like, wait a minute, I wanna work with you a lot, because I grew up listening to him on the Credibility Gap down in Los Angeles, at KPBC. And so I knew who he was, I loved him. And Jerry kept making offers, got nowhere with it. The record was over, so Jerry had to walk out of the studio, and we see him walk by the window with his head down, looking totally rejected. And I said to Harry, "Why not? Why wouldn't you take it?" This is the lesson he taught me. He said, "I love radio too much to do it every day." I was like, okay. And that was a really big lesson.
Why did he audition?
Yeah, right. Why was he there?
Because he got a free ride to San Francisco, and it was fun for him.
Got to
And
play.
did you have sex with him? That was
Got
our
to-
time.
Yeah,
Okay.
getting back to
Because
the sex.
that's where we started.
We ended up with Bob McClay, though. It ended up with Bob
And
McClay
you
was
had
the morning-
sex with Bob,
I
we know
had
that.
sex with Bob.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We all did.
Yes.
Really, I think everybody did.
Yeah, everybody
So,
did.
Joanne, let's see, Denise Bourdette had left, Larry Lee was gone, and so they
This is
needed
what
to
year
hire,
about?
this is 1979, they needed to hire a new, 78, end of 78. So they needed to hire a new news person, and they went over and found this young woman out of Berkeley at KRE who was doing public affairs, Joanne Rosenzweig, and they brought her over to do news. So we started dating, and we would go in the newsroom and turn on the microphone so the on-air light would be on, and we would make out.
Aw.
That was the sex. I'm going to keep it there.
Aw.
That's good.
So yeah, so we ended up. And we're
I was
still
in a
married
relationship at the time, so, you know, a monogamous guy. So, you know, I kept seeing the opportunities there. And I mean, as far as drugs go, I mean, for me, it was just, you know, going down to the basement. And,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
at KSAN
The
there.
Glaucoma
and
Research Center.
The Glaucoma Research Center, that's right.
That was an
And,
interesting place.
Well, I think,
A lot of
you know,
socializing going on down
talking
there.
about the transition from the psychedelic era to what I would call the new wave sort of punk era that we got into, I don't think much changed from the I think the psychedelic era, maybe with the lack of maybe acid, the pot stayed. There was no the pot never went away.
No.
But we added the coke in you know, mid 70s, and I remember I heard that behind the stacks, you know, you could open a door and there would be a little
Mirror.
tray,
Mirror with play.
and there were lines of coke, and you know, you could help yourself. I heard about this, you know, and I did Saturday nights, so I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. So that was what I experienced, and just the pot was constant. There was never any kind of
Yeah.
okay, that's over.
Right.
No, it was constant
Until this day.
until this day.
I was gonna say, it really hasn't changed.
The rule was like from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. we went down to the
The
Glaucoma
basement.
Research Center.
The basement,
Exactly.
From
yeah.
6 p.m. round the clock
Clock.
to 9
was-
a.m.
Out in the open.
Right
It was
there
out
in
in
the
the
studio.
open.
We
Right.
smoked
Or
and talked
anywhere
and
around the
everything.
building.
In the booth, always,
All
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
always.
I don't recall meth heads at the station.
No.
I don't either.
I
Well, actually, I have a story
Good.
that's along
Thank
those
you.
lines.
Thank you.
We always suspected you, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what it was, huh?
that's why I always carried a torch with me.
That's true.
People thought I was welding in my spare time. No.
Sure.
This has to do with a visit. This would have been '78, I'm guessing. A visit to the station by David Crosby. And I don't mind talking about it because it's well-known history, right? And it's been out there. So anyway, he came in to do a nighttime interview. I don't remember who the jock was at the time. He and Graham Nash were making records at the time, so they had a new record out. So, typical sort of situation, doing an interview to plug the record. And I was in the production studio right next door to the Air studio, so I didn't witness any of this with my eyeballs, but knowing the acoustics of things and being very familiar with those two studios, I was listening to the Air feed in the production studio, and you could hear the torch going in the background,
It was welding.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
Apparently there's a bad mic connection or something. I guess he was welding it. I don't know. And just other interesting little noises and breathing, weird breathing and stuff. And so.
I mean, I think we witnessed. I don't know if you call it debauchery. I mean, there's times being at KSAN and seeing people come in, and I remember it was a Saturday morning or a weekend morning, and Deborah Harry, Blondie, and the band came in. She had a bag of malt balls and a couple of 6-packs of Budweiser. And they went in to do an interview and stuff, and they had been up all night since we had just done, I think, the live show the night before or something. And so they were coming by to the station to do an interview, and people eventually, went to rehab. They died, or
Went to rehab.
Well, that goes back to Bob McClay.
yeah.
I became a problem with the union because what Bob would do, he would come in the morning. They gave him the morning shift. He had previously done afternoons for years. But they were trying to straighten him up because he had a cocaine and an alcohol problem. So they thought if they gave him the morning show, it would help him. He would have to wake up. And so he would come stumbling in at 6 in the morning. The show would start at 6. He'd arrive somewhere between 5 of and 10 after, 6 a.m. And he would be just a wreck. He would be a mess. So McQueen would start with the 6 a.m. news. We'd come out, and McClay would lean in, turn on the mic, and go, "This is KSAN in San Francisco. Here's Peter Gabriel." And then he'd walk out of the room, go behind the music library, and go to sleep. I would pick the records, I would play the records, I would play a promo, I would play a commercial or two, go back to the record. At 6:25, I'd go in and go, "McClay, McClay,
get
gotta
up.
introduce McQueen again."
We
So
need
come
you.
back in, it's 6:30, this is KSAN in San Francisco, here's Dave McQueen with the news. And you go back to sleep.
Yeah.
And this went on until 8:30 because then people would start coming in. So he would never talk, he would never play records. I was doing the whole thing and working. McQueen and I were like, what are we going to do? It's like we can't rat on him, we can't do it. And this went on until we just couldn't do it anymore, and they opened it up and brought in Norm Weiner after that.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And that was an interesting one because I'd get to the office at 5:30 in the morning. I'd get to station at 5:30 in the morning. Norman Davis was finishing up his show. He'd stick a joint in my mouth as soon as I walked in.
Yep.
5:30 in the morning. He and I would smoke a joint. Norm would come in, start cutting up lines. Okay, this is let's go. Yeah, Mystery Melody.
Yeah. And then I took that producer job after you left, and I worked with Norm in the mornings for a few months. I forget how long exactly. But yeah, it was crazy, those mornings. Daryl Martini calling in from Boston.
Oh,
That's
love
right, the
Daryl.
Cosmic
With the-
Muffin.
Daryl.
Yeah, the astrology reports
Yes.
and
retrograde.
yeah, Norm was a great guy, great fun to work
I
with.
remember working
Yes.
with him in the evenings. I could have sworn they were evenings.
You know, Norm
He
Davis.
start,
Norm Davis was doing the evenings, and
Norm Miner
Miner,
started
yeah.
out in the
And the
evenings,
evenings
while
was-
McClay was in mornings.
Mornings.
That's when I was
Right.
doing
Go to
interning, I guess, because
Afternoons after that?
I wouldn't have gotten up in the morning.
But we haven't really talked much about sex. So I do have a story
yes.
in the studio. I didn't actually see it, but I heard it. So this was a night that 999 is a punk band played at the Waldorf. They came back. I was interviewing. I was interviewing one of them.
Did you just
Are you
remember
involved in this
something?
story?
I don't know what's going on
I
in
was
her head.
I was there.
So I was in the production studio doing an interview, and somebody with one of the band members were making out right behind the console of the production studio while I'm trying to do this interview. So that was sound effects were there, yeah, and it was actually happening right there. So lots of things go on, and I'm sure that it happened all over the station.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
I would start like during Richard's show.
Yep.
You know, well, it was, let's see. My day at KSAN would start. I'd come in. The music director would give me the bag of pot, where I'd go downstairs and roll the joints. While I was rolling the joints, the news crew was smoking their morning joints and doing their mid-morning lines because they had been there since 6. Then the music director would come down, and we'd smoke. Then we'd go upstairs and go to work. Then after doing some work, it was probably getting close to noon, go over to the FC,
Uh-huh.
get a couple of
Remember the
brewskis,
FC?
have a
Financial
cup,
corner.
come back
Always.
down, go downstairs to back down to the basement, then back up, do some work. The Beaver would come on at 2:30. It was at 2:30, 3 o'clock, we'd go get her a beer run.
Yeah.
And we'd always keep it by the side of the desk. And so it would be this progression. She was on till 6, then TK came on, and he always had something good to smoke. By then, of course, the business staff had left, so everything was out in the open. And you go through TK's show, go to the clubs, you come back. Meanwhile, Richard would be on. And then while Richard was on, people would kind of drift in after the clubs, and that's when the party would really start.
Yeah.
Because all kinds of drugs. And then we went into Sean.
Uh-huh.
So this went into
Sean Donahue.
Sean Donahue. And then on the, was it Friday nights? Was the Heretics, which was
Right.
Howie
Oh,
Klein
yeah,
and
yeah,
Cosmo, which
yeah.
was the punk. So then people would just start congregating at KSAN after the clubs close, or they've seen what they've wanted to see, and there was a better party there. There were many nights that there was all kinds of things going on in the production room.
Yes.
I'm not naming names.
No.
I'm saying, but yeah, but there were times I've walked in. It's like
Yeah.
There's some segments that in some interviews we've done that some very famous sex acts that happen in the studio.
Yeah.
oh, so there was some.
Yeah,
there was
very
some.
famous. But this kind of makes my drug story kind of tame. I was because we had third-class licenses. Another great thing to
Yeah.
KSFS. Ron Rodriguez, our program director,
Yeah.
had said, I want you guys to get third-class licenses.
Right.
So we went through that. We took the training. We got our
I
license.
had
So
one of those too.
I had Larry Lee didn't have a license. So one of my first
He did
gigs
have
was
one.
engineering his weekend show.
Yeah.
He'd come do a weekend show.
Yeah.
And when he was there during the week, it didn't matter because we had a DJ on there that had a license. But and then one of the second jobs I got was doing this all night from midnight. I'd come in at midnight on a Sunday evening, and I would align and calibrate all the machines, clean the heads, do all this stuff.
Fun that
We would do
sounds.
anything to
Yeah,
work.
wow.
Yeah,
Yes.
anything.
Oh,
yeah.
we
My
were-
God.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Anything.
And so I know I can't remember who was on at night, that weekend
night?
night, but and it may have been my last year there. I actually, Tom Yates gave me the 6 p.m. to midnight to 6 a.m. shift, and so I'd be up all night, and then Stephen Capon would come in, and so we'd party for a while to start him off in the morning. But one night when I was cleaning up stuff, the console in the studio, you could lift it up, and I'd go there with a brush to try to clean things out. I lift it up, and there's this huge roach. And I go, sweet. I don't know. It's 3, 4 in the morning. So, you know,
You're not talking something that had legs.
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
no, we're not. It was a big one. So I go, I can't remember where I went, but I got a match. I lit that thing up. I took a big, deep puff, and I almost vomited because I think it was one of Dave McQueen's tobacco cigarettes he'd rolled. I was like, oh my God, that's the last time I do that. I was so desperate at that point, you know.
McQueen was amazing.
He was.
Rolling joints.
Yeah.
He would do, you know, because he had lived his newscast. He would just he knew what all the stories were, and he would put them down, and he would just put the paper down on the desk while he was doing the newscast, and he would just tell you the news. But while he was doing it, he'd be rolling a joint at the same time. He was amazing.
Very
To watch
talented
him.
guy.
He was incredible.
A couple other stories just quickly about drugs and such. The Summer in the City series of live shows that the station did in like summer of '78, I think. One of them was the Ramones at Civic Center
Center.
Plaza. And so we had our remote van out there, and they needed a dressing room for a few moments before going on. And it was a really rare, hot San Francisco summer day. And of course, they're all wearing leather jackets and would not shed them. Understandably. If I were Joey Ramone, I'd do the same thing.
They're the Ramones.
But anyway,
Yeah.
so they were hanging out in the truck while everybody's just kind of getting things ready, and it's time for them to go on. So they leave the truck, and you know, us technical people start getting to work doing our thing. And I noticed that on the floor in the van are all these little white tablets, just kind of strewn around. That they weren't mine, they weren't George's or.
Ed.
Yeah, Ed's or so, kind of putting 2 and 2 together there. And then the last story I think I have about drugs and KSAN is that before I got involved working there, I was a major KSAN listener fan going back to 1970-ish, growing up. So I was a big fan all through the 70s, felt like I got to know all the jocks, and then of course getting to know them and work with them professionally as well was just it's like, kick me, you know. But I remember one time before I got to work there, Richard was doing his show and began playing the Doors song "Riders on the Storm," which, as we know, starts out with the sound effects of the rainstorm, right? So there's a skip in the record within that rainstorm segment, and it's repeating and repeating and repeating. And I'm at home listening, and and I start to notice it, and I'm thinking, okay, where's the little bump to make it go forward? Richard, come on, And
assuming Richard's in the studio.
well,
Yeah.
exactly. So this went
Nowhere
on.
near there.
This went on, I think, for about 15 or 20 minutes.
Awesome.
And after a while, it became really entertaining. It's like, okay, how long is this going to go on?
You
Exactly.
kept listening.
Sure, of course.
That never happened today. Well, they don't do records anymore. So
right.
yeah.
So anyway, with that as background, and then coming to the station later, and being on the inside and seeing how things work and what goes on, and the basement, and all the other shenanigans, I totally understood what happened with that record. It made total sense.
Sue, are you going to admit anything?
Okay, Slate. Actually, I have one quick story. It was when I was working in the music library as an intern, and Gossett, of course, always had, as we know, friends in from wherever to join him on a show, from his dealers to rock stars. But he said there's this young guy that's going to come in to the librry. Can you help him? He's going to do a show tonight with me. He's playing for the first time at the old Waldorf. Can you help him pick out his music? I said sure. So the guy comes in and he goes, well, I really like the Beatles. Yay. Want to play some Stones. And then I really like Elvis. I go, love this guy's taste in music. So, we're pulling his records, and then he did his show, and he comes back after the show, and we're all up in the studio with Richard in the studio, and he's playing a set and stuff, and of course firing up, and we're all smoking because that's what you did back then. And we look around, and everybody was passed out, and it was the only ones upright were Richard Gossett, myself, and this young guy named Tom Petty. And I think somewhere I still have the roach somewhere, because no, it was Killer Weed, and I just remember Richard and Tom looking at me going, "How are you still upright? Built like a Mack truck. What can I say?"
Remember we had that amazing beer bottle collection in the studio on top of the record library, right? Empty
Yeah.
beer bottles, but like every one of them different. That was clearly that was Richard Gossett and Sean.
And
Sean Donahue, yeah.
And what was the name of the guy? Remember, there used to be a guy that'd come by every couple of weeks, maybe it was once a week, and he baked
The Cookie Man.
Cookie Man.
Cookie-
The
Cosmic
brownies.
cookies.
Cosmic
dog.
cookies.
Cosmic
cookies.
Dog.
One'll do ya.
Yeah.
Dog?
Oh my
Yeah.
God. Whew.
D-A-W-G, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Dog? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the rabbi would come by too. Charles? Yeah, he'd come by with his briefcase full of goodies. Yeah.
And then there was the bagel guy who just had bagels.
Yeah.
But-
What are you gonna do?
Well, Tom Petty's a nice segue into the KSAN live shows and the experience that many of us had. Going to live shows or working.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
Very
I
nice.
still have mine.
It's mine. It's got my name on it right there.
Nice.
And
Legendary.
Oh, let's see.
oh, who wants to see Dave?
Oh. Let's see, where's the camera?
There it is. You got it.
Oh, love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were. I can't remember the year. It had to be 77.
Is when it started.
And George Craig, the chief engineer, and Ed Ealer, they mentioned, well, we're building a remote truck and we're looking for crew, and Dave and I and others.
Here's a
said,
photograph.
Here, Dave's got a photograph.
From an old SF Bay Guardian,
Is
1978.
that Bob Sarlott
That's
on
Bob
the cover?
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
God.
Yeah.
I interviewed Bob Sarlott here. at
And
KSFS.
I guess we'll get you a scanned copy of this, but
Yeah.
there's a photograph there of
Truck.
George and me and Ern Morgan.
Earn.
So we got hired at $3.50 an hour,
That was okay.
and that was great. We worked for free. I mean, the union wage was great. It was like $8 or $9 an hour.
I don't know, wasn't
I was in the union.
Didn't you
I
Yeah.
ended up,
to engineer?
Yeah.
Didn't you have to?
Yeah,
I wasn't an
IBEW.
engineer.
Oh, that's right. You were a
Right,
producer.
And so what ended up, because I was doing that whole thing with McClay, and then union negotiations were coming up. Norman Davis, who was the spokesperson for the
Right,
union,
yeah.
they banned me from doing it. So that means McClay had to stay awake for the entire show. He
Right.
hated that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember the union meetings sitting in L. David Moorhead's office.
Nuclear war.
L. Nuclear Warhead, right. And he there was a speed freak,
Yeah,
really.
he was a speed freak.
And I remember we're all talking about, I decided, hey, I'll be in the negotiating committee. I'm in the union. I want to do anything I can to,
Sure.
help my career here. And he's at the head of the table and he's fumbling around with his lighter and butane lighter and goes, he's just like, dude. Anyway, but the live shows, the truck got built, and I think Dave, you worked. Wasn't the first one like AC/DC?
Yeah, at the old Waldorf. I have a cassette dub of it at home.
Oops.
And I know,
admit
shh,
that,
don't
did
tell
you?
anybody.
Yeah.
And we just saw them recently at AT&T Park, with a friend of mine who's a big AC/DC fan. I'm like, wow, it's a
But the
long
shows
time.
were amazing. Just
Long
to
time.
be able to work on those.
Yeah,
You'd
yeah.
go from,
Yeah, God.
Devo and Dire Straits and Blondie and Elvis Costello, and it just
Rock
it
and
went
roll.
on and
They chose
on.
the old Waldorf.
And they were all new acts.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah, I saw their
KSAN was
first
the
tour.
only place that you can hear these people.
That's
and
right.
we were
Nick Lowe.
Right.
Nick,
Oh,
yeah,
you
rock
too.
and roll.
Ian Dury.
The Jam. It was
The U2
it was that
show,
kind of punk scene that
Had to
led us into the
replay
Sex
several songs,
Pistols,
yeah, enough songs to
and
do a whole
That
set.
was-
which one of the things we want to talk about is the the kind of the change in format at KSAN, and was that the beginning of the end? I think
Yes.
we had a very strong punk scene going on, and that's a limited audience. We all loved it. I mean, I'd get up in the morning and pogo. That was the first thing I did to wake up, right? And
Still do.
still do, yeah. But that was a very narrow audience, and it was very strong.
Well, we
Strong
believed
musical.
It was the next wave.
It was.
Right.
It was the
Right.
next
Yeah.
big thing.
I'll never forget. I would play so much British music because it was what was, happening, what was new, that Abby would go through my music list after, British, you gotta stop it, you gotta
Right.
stop it.
Well, that was, I think Abby was the program director
Yeah.
when they had to institute the playlist,
Yeah.
the first playlist.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was a significant day.
Right.
It was, and I'll never forget because Sean Donahue, who was doing the all nights at the time, Norman wasn't doing it, or maybe he was just all nights on weekends. But just after this was all instituted, he and I played this nasty little trick that was really subtle, and we just didn't want to tell anybody and see if anyone ever recognized it. But the outside the studio was the on-air light. We peeled off all the letters and switched it around to read in AOR.
Album-oriented rock.
Album-oriented rock, right? Because they
Nice.
wanted to think it's Camel.
Yeah.
Was kicking our ass.
Yeah, they
That's
were.
basically what was
I remember
going on.
that right when the new format was instituted, I was in the production room somewhere in the station, and Glenn Lambert had come on, and suddenly Glenn goes, "This is KSAN in San Francisco, and here's some Journey. We're going to play some Journey for you now." Boom. Went right into a Journey song, and he just, we're top 40 now at KSAN, so and he would play, and he's playing this music, and he locked the door, and,
And he
Abby's
And he wouldn't answer the hotline.
wouldn't answer the hotline.
The phone
that
is
went
ringing.
on for a
He
while,
ignored it.
and I
There were a
don't.
lot of
He
bitter
was.
people
There was a
when
lot
that
of it.
Yeah.
Well, it
And-
really
Well, yeah.
messed with people's morale. And at the time that it was during TK's show, and Abby and Jerry went in and cleaned out the record library,
Yeah.
and then they closed off the record library. So then it was like, this was all you could play.
Yes.
Red dots.
Red
Red
dots,
dots, green
Green
dots.
dots, right? Of what,
yellow dots.
You know, it's
of
funny-
What you could play a lot of, and what you,
Yes.
only
Right.
once per shift,
Yeah.
Right.
or once an hour.
Yep.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the morale just kept going
Was- yeah.
down, and the jocks became more rebellious.
Yep.
I came
Yeah.
in, and Norman, I think, was one of the first casualties, Norman Davis.
Yes.
And I remember walking in one morning, and I look on the bulletin board, and it was a memo from Abby. It said, "Norman Davis has been terminated."
Wow.
Yeah.
That was a harsh reality for college students.
It was.
Yeah.
Yes.
To
Yeah.
do that kind of thing.
It
because
was a
it was,
cold
uh,
business.
Yeah.
Well, and
Right.
especially Norman. I mean,
Yeah.
the man still is an institution. In those days, he had that long legacy back in
KSFO, was it?
or
yeah.
KYA.
KYA.
KYA, top 40
Yeah.
Yeah.
in the early and mid 60s, and then his long legacy through the FM side, and so to see that he was terminated was kind of eye opening.
Actually, I was the first time I'd ever been fired from a job was Jackie McCauley was the program director.
Yeah.
After that,
You
yeah.
and
She
your-
fired me.
Yes.
We just don't like your voice. Okay, you're out.
What do you
That's
mean?
all
You're
it
on your-
takes.
you're on your
Yeah,
honeymoon.
You sound too young. Yeah.
Well, tell your vacation
And it-
story.
And,
You're on their
well,
honeymoon.
actually,
They were on their honeymoon, right?
Right.
Oh, I remember.
Joanne was doing morning news with Stephen Capen, who was the morning man at the time, and she was called News and Swag. That was what we were referring to her, and I was now working down in San Jose. I was at KSJO and KXRX. And the radio station down there, I kept bugging them for a raise because they had me working the two stations, which I didn't start doing. And so they gave us for our wedding gift, they gave us 2 weeks in Hawaii on trade. Right, everything was in trade those days. A condo in Maui for a week, a condo in Kauai for a week. And while we were on our honeymoon, Joanne was fired by Tom Yates after he told her that her voice sounded like Ted Nugent at full volume at 6 a.m. in the morning. He did not like her voice.
What?
And so Jack Popejoy was doing fill-in for her while we were on our honeymoon, and they really built up the wedding. There was some guy made a cake for us, and so everyone kind of knew, and because Steve and Joanne were really close, they knew that Joanne was taking off for, and so Popejoy started doing the morning news, and Joanne had this something wasn't sitting right. She woke up early one morning in Hawaii and called Stephen, going, "What's going on? Something's not right. I'm just feeling weird." And he goes, "Yeah, this is not going to be good for you. This is not going to be right." And so there was a memo issued by Tom Yates saying, please, and put up on the bulletin board, please welcome our new morning news person, Jack Popejoy. And to answer all your questions, yes, Popejoy is his real name. And that was the whole memo. It was like, Joanne never existed after that. And I was also fired while we were on our honeymoon because they went through a change of management. It's like, no trade for employees, and who's this creative? Get rid of him. And so we were both fired while we were on our honeymoon, and Made Herb came.
Wow.
That's something. Tom was the last program director. This was in Yates. And we were still doing a lot of live shows and music, and there was, the remote truck was all over the place, and it was still a great vehicle, literally, for doing all sorts of things, promotions. I remember Jim Carroll did an interview in front of the remote truck, and then he played at Sproul Hall in Berkeley. That was, we were still doing great things. So, when the end finally came, I mean, for us, it was brutal.
There was this point, because it was, the crew from LA came up, Jackie McCarley, Moorhead,
Yates.
Dave Penny. Yates didn't come at
David
first.
Perry? Is it John?
Was it
Well,
Dave Perry?
He was from the LA station, the Metro Media station.
Yeah, the Metro
program
Media
director then,
station
yeah.
came out.
KMT.
Right.
KMT, yeah.
And then
KMT.
those folks
KMT.
left, and that's when Yates came in, Dan Carlisle came in, Capon came in through somewhere in there, Buddha. So Yates was trying to revive the station with an AOR format.
Yeah, but we were
But
all gone by
You were
then.
gone. Well, we were still
Bonnie
doing remote.
and
Bon-
Richard and
Beverly,
Beverly and me, and we
Fred.
were all
Right.
wiped away.
But Jim, Dave, and I were still doing remotes.